Hello friends. Today our speaker is Dr. Tanya Mander. She is assistant professor at Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. Her research interest reflects her aim to unravel and explore the intersections of literature with various literary critical theories. She has 18 research papers in peer-reviewed, UGC recognized and CARE listed journals. She has participated, presented, and chaired sessions at numerous international, national conferences, seminars, symposiums, and workshops. Presently, she is guiding research on feminist consciousness and dystopian imagination and women writers. She contributes to the Tribune and Thread, which is the Hindu blog. Dr. Mander will be talking on teaching literature to undergraduate students, and based on her experiences, she will also be talking about online teaching in the times of COVID-19. So let's have the pleasure of listening to Dr. Tanya Mander.
Hello, participants. I welcome you to the Faculty Development Program on New Pedagogies, Creative Learning, and Creative Teaching, a Futuristic Approach. I'm Tanya Mander, Assistant Professor of English with Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Punjab. The topic of my talk today is reimagining teaching literature ingeniously. And before I commence with my talk, I congratulate the entire team associated with this faculty development program. I congratulate them for imagining the need for this conversation where we talk to each other from our experiences and bring into each other's understanding what are we doing in our actual and virtual classrooms which is yielding results, what are the best practices that have sort of motivated us as teachers. What we are witnessing presently is transition, both in environment, that is our society, and within the teaching fraternity, specifically our students. These changing contours of our reality have affected our teaching strategies too. We have not been able to sometimes match up to the changes that our students are engaging with. And my talk is primarily about keeping this in mind, taking this into consideration that my students are a generation which has been described as digital natives. I have reimagined my entire teaching strategy to the law students. If we look at the etymology of this word, teach, the Old English understanding is to show, to point out, to demonstrate, to give instruction. And you counter it with the modern day definition given by Cambridge Dictionary is to give someone knowledge, to train someone, which sort of does not talk at all about showing, demonstrating. On the other hand, word like literature, which has its root in Latin, it's all about book learning, knowledge of books. Cambridge Dictionary talks about literature in terms of written artistic works of high and lasting artistic value. When I enter my classroom as a teacher, I take both the old and the new in my mind when I will go on to teach literature to my class. I understand that I have to provide them knowledge, but I have to show and demonstrate them too. I understand that I have to transmit this knowledge of books. They are of definitely artistic works, but I also understand I need to locate all this knowledge within the conversations that are shaping our world today. Which brings me to a very, very important question. What is the role of a literature teacher in contemporary times? That hasn't changed much actually. Our role, ever since we were being taught language in the class, has been to train the mind to read with critical understanding, to ensure that our students are able to engage with various humanistic and philosophical perspectives, that they're able to write extensive analysis, that they're able to offer interpretation, to creatively express, and to most importantly, communicate. That they are able to transmit and tell the world well informed ideas, opinions, and arguments. To put it in a nutshell, I, as a literature and language teacher, am equipping my students with higher order thinking skills. And in my experience, I have done that by ensuring that I teach my students that literature is not to be viewed as something distinct from reality, as something different from reality. I take into my class this very important idea that literature essentially enriches our lives, and it is a tool to cultivate our critical mind. As a literature teacher to law students specifically, I have to put forward all the understandings of a piece of literature, that it can be an aesthetic comforter, that it can be a political agitator, that it can be destroyer of certainties, and of course, guardian of our freedom. But all this is very easily said by me, because there is a question that makes it very difficult for literature teachers to do their assigned roles in present times. How do you transmit the knowledge of books to present day students who are accustomed to screens which offer short flickers of information and they immediately dissolve and disappear into the great debris of all online knowledge? How do we counter this? This is the reality. This is the world that our students are living in. So, what can I do as a teacher to get them engaged enough in my class, to get them motivated enough to look away from their screens? What can I do to provide that kind of stimulation, that kind of engagement in literature classes? Pransky, one of our very prominent educationists, in 2001 has called this generation digital natives. Now, when he says digital natives, what is he saying? He's saying that this generation, they are native speakers of digital language of computers, videos, and internet. And I have put this truth center stage in my classroom teaching and in my virtual teaching. Both my actual classrooms and virtual classrooms acknowledge this fact that I am teaching a generation of digital natives, that I will have to think of templates where I can get them engrossed, even if it means bringing digital platforms in my classroom. Over the years, I have reimagined, I have reinvented all of my teaching strategies. And I have painstakingly researched every semester on how to improve what was missing and what can more be added to my classrooms. Before I begin with the sections of my PowerPoint presentation, which are going to deal individually with what am I doing differently in different dimensions of my teaching, I wish to clarify right in the beginning that all my classroom activities, my course curriculum, my assignments emphasize. It's very important for me that I'm able to cultivate the skill of individual opinion, individual interpretation. That I want my students, while studying literature in my class, to become part of global conversations. I do not wish to teach a piece of literature with no connection to the real world. And of course, to be honest, my experience of teaching in London has greatly shaped my strategy, my philosophy of teaching. So, the first dimension of my classroom is my course curriculum. Over the years, what have I witnessed? I have witnessed a great deal of marginalization of literature in the entire field of communications. And the argument that is put forth very commonly that interest has diminished. But what I've observed is that it's become like a cycle. We don't prescribe good literature. We don't keep in mind the generation and its needs and its reality. And we are not able to engage them. So we say the interest is diminished. And then again, we are not able to offer anything interesting either. I understand it's very easy for me to sit here in the talk and talk about redrafting, redoing your course curriculum, wherein I know that most of the time this is in the hands of selected few senior professors. But what I'm about to say is that please make your voice heard. I had to make a presentation to the law professors that why it is important for me to teach literature to law students and not just legal jargon, legal maxims, or some technical words or drafting skills only. See, I understand that society influences the curriculum and curriculum influences the society. It reflects some of the values that are recognized by the society. So, unless we make our ideas visible, we make our voice audible, people are more than willing to put another discipline on the margin. Of course, we have to keep in mind the kind of department we are taking on, the university profile, and the target student audience that we have. Because most of my peers are presently teaching in monodiscipline universities, whether it's engineering or law. I made a presentation, I remember, and David Kidd is a social psychologist that I did quote extensively in my presentation because he has undertaken series of experiments to show that how literature challenges readers cognitively. It sort of highlights subjectivity and also existence of multiple perspectives. So what is happening in a literature class is that students have to integrate several strands of knowledge and information so as to make sense, so as to understand what is the piece of literature offering. My suggestion here to my peers is that if you have a course of English compulsory or English which is spread over, like in my case, over 3 semesters or 4 semesters, one can easily pick up a sort of common strand, a thematic concern. For example, gender or women writers, or myths, or rural and urban literature, or utopian and dystopian literature. In my case, I picked up pieces of literature which overlap or offer the intersection of literature and law, but I offer them types of literature. In semester 1, my students are doing prose and fiction and poetry. In semester 2, my students are doing drama, prose, and poetry. In semester 3, my students are doing short stories and linguistics, thereby offering them a taste of all the different types of genres that are available within this umbrella term of literature. And so far as going beyond the course curriculum is concerned, I have supplemented this with talking circles, discussion groups, or Google Classrooms. That means offering them texts, ideas, conversations which are connected to what they are reading, but not only those which they are reading. That means articles which explore other texts, other ideas, other narratives which are close to what they are reading and what is the world saying. Another dimension of my course curriculum is your internal assessment. Each year, my students are expected to work on a literary piece, and over here, I have realized in my 12, 13 years of teaching here in the Law University is to dismantle the grid. I'm not asking you to destroy the framework, which would not yield any result for anyone. I'm asking you to dismantle it, loosen it just a bit so that you are able to make space for experiments. You are able to offer flexibility and you're able to sort of push your students towards engagement. And when I say engagement here, for me, over the years, engagement means setting up challenges for students that are meaningful, beyond the grade, but that's the essential role of a literature teacher. We are talking about cultivating a critical, analytical perspective. And it cannot come if we are prescribing the templates in which they have to situate their readings, their understandings, their interpretations. It has offered me a space for peer teaching. I mean, it has helped me great deal as a literature teacher when for my project I have 5 students saying that we will be working on partition literature, each one picking up a different author, a different genre, but at the same time each one talking about how they can take on a different dimension of partition literature. This has yielded a great result to me. It has met my objectives of getting them engaged only because I am willing to offer them a space where they can bring in their ideas to play. Ours is a course curriculum which is spread over 3 semesters. So when students select an additional text for project, I ask them to explore the intersections of law and literature. And why do I do that? I do that so that they are able to see how these pieces of literature are rooted in some of the most significant social and cultural concerns. Of course, all that I'm teaching in my actual class is put into practice when they are writing and reading out their papers as seminar presentations at the end of the semester. I also teach linguistics, so I bring in diverse resources to supplement my teaching. Cartoon strips, hashtags, paintings, popular music and videos, each one reinforcing, each one making them comprehend the relevance of what we are doing in our actual classroom. Of course, the intertextual perspective also helps the student to look at the language and literature as living structures constructed by our society. Appropriation by popular culture has helped my students to recognize the enduring influence and authority of literature in our everyday lives. So within the idea of course curriculum, I have one part of curriculum which is very visible, which is there in the PDF of syllabus, but the other is the hidden curriculum. The hidden curriculum where I am able to push them towards newer ideas, where I am able to support their active learning. This is these are the guidelines that I offer for project at the beginning of each semester. Why I put them in black and white is so that my students are very clear what is to be done in the first semester, what are the ideas that I'm asking them to explore in second semester, or what is it that is expected out of a third semester project work, which is very, very different from first 2 semester. My course curriculum is actually mapping their trajectory of progress. Each semester, the level goes up. The level of difficulty, the level of the work that is expected from them goes up. If it is simple in semester 1, it gets complex and complicated by semester 3. The second dimension where I've been able to re-strategize and reimagine is my classroom. So before I begin by talking about what I've done, I want my peers to understand that this new media, these online platforms, please understand that they are not designed to replace the printed text. Rather, as a teacher of literature, I have felt very strongly that these online media platforms have helped me to lead my students to the text. I have reimagined my classroom because I understand what is driving this generation. They are constantly connected. They speak the language of images and emojis. And it challenges mostly the literature class because the entire business of teaching literature rests on imagination. So the only way I could reimagine my classroom was by bringing them in the classroom. I am one of the few teachers who asks them to open their smartphones, look at the handles of Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook pages when we are doing certain ideas or concerns in the classroom. For example, when we are doing critical discourse analysis, or we are doing Handmaid's Tale, or we are doing 1984, the hashtag intersectional feminism or unwomanly has really brought in some aspects which are sometimes, which I, in my imagination, I had thought are beyond the comprehending skills of undergraduate students. I have had, in fact, these are some of the resources that I would want my peers to explore. Hashtag Lord of the Flies or Reading Between the Lines, and specifically in my case, literature and law. What happens is, when I ask them to look at these conversations, I am breaking down the walls of my classroom. I am bringing in the world into my classroom, which suits me great deal as a literature teacher because they get motivated. What I'm teaching in my classroom is not obsolete, it is not redundant, it is not classic, it is not something that nobody is talking about it anymore. Rather, it is something which even today is relevant. See, as literature teacher, we know that literature informs and reflects. We know that it's a complex sum of contradictory truths. But how do you bring that understanding to the class? Newspaper reports, analytical newspaper articles, interviews, and not necessarily just of the authors, or comments, not necessarily again just of the authors. Sometimes a speech of a member of the parliament, sometimes a newspaper article dealing with a issue that is not exactly connected to your work but somehow is reflective of the ideas that you are undertaking in the class. So, for example, these are the few newspaper articles that I have discussed in my classroom. When I was doing Antigone, Greek tragedy of our times, from the newspaper The Irish Times. Crucible, the perfect play for our post-truth times from The Guardian. Or this article in The Guardian came in May 2020, The Real Lord of the Flies. What happened when six boys were rescued after 15 months? Or why Handmaid's Tale is so relevant today from BBC Culture. See, I make an effort that my students understand that literature is a conversation with the world. And these interactions, these newspapers that I've sent them, these are interactions beyond the timetable. So, what have I done? What have I been able to do is I have been able to initiate my students into reading beyond the curriculum. But I say this with another truth, and that is I'm not claiming all 200 students of mine are responding the way that I want them to respond. But when even 50% or 45% of my students are responding the way I want them to respond, that I feel is an achievement. So within the classroom also, I have made effort to get acquainted to different needs of this wide spectrum of student population. I cannot ignore the fact that within the National Law School, I have students coming from international schools and I have students coming from the rural schools. So, remedial classes, extra classes, and the talking circles that I had just mentioned in the previous slides, all these have made me a hands on teacher of literature and language for my students. It has built the kind of faith that is required in this teaching learning dialogue. My method of teaching within the classroom is it stresses on student participation and arranged debates. I do not allow like a free for all debate. It has to be arranged because I need to teach them not only reading, writing skills, but also speaking skills. I have always tried to put my literature piece within the matrix or the grid of factual, artistic, and biographical contexts. And I have always asked them to formulate their responses with support of evidence from the text, and I have objectively viewed their interpretation. I have never negated outrightly an idea that has been put forward in the classroom. Another thing that I had learned from one of my peers is what we understand as collaborative learning. It has helped me to ease my own burden as well of evaluation, and it has offered an objective viewpoint to my students. The students exchange their written work and evaluate their drafts. This is an exercise that we often take in the class. So, what it helped me with? So, constructive criticism coming from their peer, objective understanding. When you read somebody else's answer, you automatically figure and understand what is missing, what is wrong. You are able to point out the semantic and syntactic errors. You are able to sort of frame the ambiguities, what is lacking in the answer. This collaborative learning and exercise, which the students do amongst themselves with me standing in the class, helps both the teacher and the learner. Another activity that I put a lot of faith in is reading in the class. I have had reactions in a number of discussions with sometimes my peers or sometimes in conferences or workshops where the essential idea today is that we don't read in the class. I am not judging this, but what I have achieved in my class, I'm putting forward that. Sometimes we read the entire text, and sometimes we read the excerpts of the text. I believe reading in the class is one of the most important activities that we can take on. And when I say the excerpts in the class, if it is Lord of Flies or 1984 or Handmaid's Tale, I read excerpt from the first chapter to the last. It sometimes takes 4 to 5 lectures, which are 1 hour duration, that means 5 hours, but I'm willing to put in that kind of time. From each, it's an engaged reading once again. From each chapter, I highlight and take out ideas and parts which I believe are important for making them understand symbols or metaphors or the narrative structures. For me, as a literature teacher, I understand that reading skills in this generation are not strong and they are not consistent. So, all the more reason for me to take on reading exercises so that they understand the difference between literary works and every other kind of work. And it becomes a group activity. It becomes a site of excavation. We are all constructing and deconstructing meaning together. We are all attempting to understand the isolated features of that piece. When I bring in songs and advertisements to be played out to explain and exemplify semantics or pragmatics, I have uh, taken my students into the social and cultural understanding of these language and meaning. Of course, every time I am able to mark the interconnectedness of the text. That means when I'm doing Handmaid's Tale, it's not that we've done 1984 and it will never be mentioned again because that was done in semester 1. No, when you've done the reading exercise together in the class, it becomes very easy for me to take them back to that text and highlight the connections. Yes, of course, for law students, it becomes very, very important for me to show them these overlapping structures of power, to pinpoint how the ideas of race, gender, sexuality, or discourse are framed in the written word. People get really surprised when I tell them that I teach my law students poetry too. I feel that most of them believe that what use is poetry. But as most of my peers who are teaching literature would understand, that it is poetry that brings into play these metacognitive skills within the student fraternity, which challenges the language use, helps you to offer your students how to interpret and comprehend, how to break down, how to understand all the ambivalence and the ambiguity, and that they can exist when everything else has to make a perfect meaning. ambivalence and ambiguity can also exist. Most of the time, when I undertake poetry, I have used lots of images. I have taken on detailed biographical sketches and also age related information, if it's a 20th century poem or 21st century poem. And of course, interviews with the authors. And this generation is really, really keen on controversies. So, when you bring in the controversies related to the text of poetry that you are doing in the class, I feel I get them more interested. Now, the third most important aspect of my strategy is research. We all know UGC has made very, very sure that we as teachers understand the relevance of research. But I believe not just for our own professional growth. There's no point of researching if you're not bringing that research back into your classroom. So this is one of my key ideas of integrating research into teaching. One of the very obvious understandings is I am updated, I can give them a broader view. But the truth be told, that when I research, I am able to offer them a reading with the text and a reading against the text. That means where you can ask them questions to set them thinking why Lord of the Flies has no woman character. Sorry about that. And I'm able to offer this tension between competing discourse perspectives. I'm able to offer them a feminist point of view, but also a psychoanalytical point of view. I'm able to offer a cross cultural perspective. Of course, I'm able to give them new resources. When I say research, I'm not only saying academic research. It has helped me a lot to offer my students something from their culture to understand the piece of literature that we are doing within the classroom. When we do Lord of the Flies, Hunger Games is a movie that I recommend that they read. When we do Crucible, post truth understanding of the play and the related articles are something that I ask them to read. Similarly, 1984, luckily for me, Fahrenheit 451 is a movie which I recommend them to see. Antigone and its various adaptations in 19th, 20th, and 21st century. Each one lets me explain to my students how each piece of literature is relevant, significant, is still being talked about within the premise of academia and the world. For a student researcher, I believe that you need to consciously embed that in student learning. The resultant that we get is, the consequence of this is that the student feels that they are no longer just consuming knowledge, they are producing knowledge. The role changes. So, second, very important, that at undergraduate level, they are being nudged to learn research methodologies. Of course, they are engaging only in limited applications within the internal assessment assignments, but still, they are able to question their reality. They are able to interpret, connect, and explore their reality. And how to cross these interdisciplinary boundaries. When you are researching, one thing, one idea leads to another, one question leads to another, and not necessarily within the same discipline. I have seen my students able to identify some very, very significant arguments. I've actually witnessed them evaluating each other's understanding and comprehension. So, as a teacher of literature, I feel that research must enrich my teaching in the classroom. My knowledge and skill set would obviously help my students, but I'm also teaching them a manner and method of writing and reading. And to be honest, I've also seen them get motivated to pursue postgraduate studies once they've taken on these research activities. Coming on to this online teaching and learning business. Now, of course, COVID 19 has challenged every idea that has marked our understanding of teaching. We are moving, at present, we are definitely moving away from traditional face to face classroom onto online learning. From resource for learning, online platforms have become the only source of learning. Like I was talking to someone and somebody said that now the role has moved from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. But I still do not wish to view myself as a guide on the side. I want to be with the students, learning with them. Now, in past few months, what is it that I learned about online teaching and learning? My role changed completely. I am a motivated teacher myself, but when I embarked on this journey of online teaching, I realized that my cognitive role has changed. I have to offer a much, much deeper level of understanding. My effective role as a teacher has changed. To maintain a relationship with my students when actually we are not in the same room, when actually we are not sharing real time interaction, and my managerial role. To finish the syllabus, to mark the attendance, everything about my teacher, my role as a teacher changed. But how did I manage? How did I navigate this very, very new field, at least for me, of online teaching? So, one thing I realized was that because it's becoming a source of learning, therefore, I need to shift a certain burden of learning on my students too, which meant before I have a live classroom interaction with them, I need to have them read and come prepared for that classroom interaction, making them responsible for what is the kind of discussion that is going to ensue in the classroom. In the month of April and in the month of May, to cover my syllabus, 3 online classes in the month of April, 3 online classes in the month of May. So, what did I actually rely on? Because I had almost 2 modules to finish for my syllabus. I relied on asynchronous sources or technology. For example, the podcasts. I did reading and analysis of the poems and the prose pieces on the podcast. Each podcast was sent to my students, at least the last podcast I believe was 17th of April, and the classes that I started taking 20th, 29th, and 30th of April, giving them a good 10-day gap to listen, assimilate, mark out problematic areas, frame questions for discussion, and read related articles. This helped me. So when they came to me in the live class, I found most of them already well read. They had framed interesting, pivotal questions, and they were really motivated. The Google Classroom platform that I sort of had, and it happened because I had the institutional support. And it's very important. When you're talking about online teaching and learning, institutional support is very, very important. But then again, in Google Classroom, I ensured that I give them YouTube videos, interviews, commentaries, and articles so that when they come for my classes, they are well prepared and well read. Giving them material from asynchronous sources. What are asynchronous sources? That class activities are not taking place in real time. It gave them freedom and independence, not only to them but to me too. So it was kind of empowering that we can listen to or we can look at this in our own free time, and very clearly mentioned schedules and what is going to be taken up in that class, which will be happening on, let's say, some date that has been told to them. So, what exactly did I learn? These are the acts, strategies that I took on. But what I learned is that even today, you cannot deny the real behind the virtual. One of the most important understandings that we all need to sort of discern is that our courses, whether they are school courses or college courses or university courses, they have been designed for in person learning. These have not been designed for digital environment. So I believe that teachers across the country and the world, we actually deserve a huge round of applause for rising to the occasion and ensuring that these courses, which are actually for in person interactive learning, are transferred successfully onto digital environment, which meant a lot of hard work. Use the tools that you're confident with. For example, I'm very confident with podcasts. I'm confident with Google Meet, but I'm not confident with Zoom. I am not confident with YouTube videos of my lessons. So, as a teacher, I keep this idea very, very uh, important, that what is filling me with confidence. If I am confident as a teacher, I will be able to deliver better. I already mentioned this, that we need to seek institutional support. But I also want to say that online teaching needs many, many, many more hours of planning than our actual teaching. For an actual teaching class of 1 hour, 2 hours are enough. For an online teaching class of 1 hour, or that sometimes even spilled over to 1.5 hour, I needed actually preparation time of 6 hours, 5 to 6 hours easily. Then each interaction, each tool that I'm using to sort of teach online, I must know what is the learning outcome that I'm anticipating. I cannot sort of jump into online teaching without knowing and understanding what this 40 minutes of podcast or what this 1.5 hour of teaching is going to yield, what is going to be the outcome. That's very, very important. Also, I would say that please use variety of methods. Don't believe that only if you are successful with one way of teaching, you are that should be the only way that you should follow. I feel that use variety of methods so that your students are not bored. I have a peer in Delhi who's doing a lot of blogs for every part or topic of the module that she's not been able to do. I also have another peer who's doing YouTube videos and she's doing them brilliantly. So use a variety of method. Use, I feel, both synchronous and asynchronous platforms allow for the space and great active engaged learning. And yes, please manage expectations both of the students and yourself. Please don't berate yourself. Don't get angry at yourself if you're not able to give your full in one odd class or two odd classes. Give yourself time. Like I said, it's a huge transition for us teachers as well. I used emails a lot. I used a lot of emails which allowed me one to one interaction with my students, also group emails which allowed me to send in your articles and commentaries to the entire class. But as we are literature teachers, I would like to just make one last suggestion, that even the online teaching learning space should be made as human as possible. We should not imagine that we will ever be able to get the desired results in this cold, sterile place as it is, which is so disconnected. We need to make our space, online platforms, human. We need to still engage and interact as humans. We cannot just say that I posted the homework, I posted the assignment, and then become oblivious of all the constraints that all of us are going through. Alright, whether it is my actual classes or my virtual classes, I have greatly relied over a period of 15 years on feedback. I have sought weekly feedbacks, I have sought end of the semester feedbacks, and these feedbacks are in addition to the formal feedback mechanism that has been initiated by my university. I believe without feedback, we will always be incomplete. We will never be able to reach the standards and maybe the heights of good teaching without feedback. Students, I do not, I have had arguments and discussions with certain people who believe that adverse remarks from a student can affect psychologically for a very long time the teacher in the classroom. But I counter this by saying that one odd adverse remark can also sort of help you to understand where exactly did the student feel that your teaching was not up to the mark. Essentially, teaching is about reinventing and reimagining each semester, each year. So I end with just pointing out that for me, mechanics of teaching are deeply embedded in number of things. I need to have clear objectives, whether it's my actual classroom or my virtual classroom. I need to have a very positive, patient class temper because I'm dealing with undergraduate students. I am going to motivate them towards learning. I cannot afford to demotivate them with my behavior in the classroom. I encourage students to ask and answer questions. I make complete effort to grade their assignments with comprehensive, detailed comments clearly mentioning their weaknesses and strengths. And most importantly, I believe I'm an instructor and a willing learner simultaneously, and this has helped me always. Thank you so much. I hope my ideas, my strategies would have been helpful. I'm sure you may like some ideas or you may not like some ideas, but as long as we are in conversation about how to improve, how to make ourselves better, that's what counts. All the very best. Thank you.